So I'm going to skip the first page of the recommendations because that's exactly the same as we've talked about in the past. There's nothing new on that first page with all the bullet points, so I'm just going to move forward to the second page. This second page hasn't actually changed either, but what does change are the following 2 pages. So the cost of the recommendations that you see there, we have updated our census in the budget system, or I should say budget has, not we. And so the cost there is a little bit updated on that third page. It's a little bit lower, mostly related to non-law enforcement structure. What we do have on the fourth page is one additional recommendation. This comes from the law enforcement group, a joint recommendation given to us last week by the Sheriff's Office and the Law Enforcement Association. So the 4 options that you see there, the first one is Korn Ferry's recommendation. That hasn't changed. We did not recost or reevaluate the cost of this plan. It would have been relatively minor and wasn't worth the work effort, really. The second column there is the law enforcement's recommendation that you've already seen. This is the one that they presented in relation with, or in conjunction with, a certification pay proposal. You'll see that we actually have the cost estimate for that certification proposal now. That is the proposal that provides for $50 for intermediate, $75 for advanced, and $100 for master certification. So the additional cost of that plan is approximately $340,000 annually. So that, in conjunction with their first recommendation, is their first proposal. The second proposal, which you see now, is a third column, law enforcement recommendation 2. That is the recommendation without considering certification pay. So the law enforcement recommendation 1, certification pay, is sort of a combined request. And if that won't be considered, they're asking for recommendation number 2. Our proposed recommendation.
So this would allow them to get the money regardless of.
That's correct. The funds are.
Well, no, the first one, the first recommendation would, as I read that, I think, would give a total of 4.4 million, and under law enforcement 2, would it be 4? It'd still be 4.4 because the 476 would stay in place, right? If we didn't do anything.
Yes.
Okay.
Our proposed recommendation is in the last column. That hasn't changed other than the cost, again, due to census, has decreased very slightly. But that is still our proposal, along with no change in certification pay. And we are seeking your approval or questions or comments.
Okay, so
you might remember that last week, as we discussed this particular issue, that one of the things that the Commissioners Court was interested in was that we increase the amount that we pay for our jailers a little bit compared to what Korn Ferry had recommended. I believe we went from 3.5% to 4% to ensure that we would remain competitive with the region as it relates to confinement. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this recommendation 2 was something we simply received this week.
That's correct. We received it on Thursday.
And we went up, as I'm looking at Korn Ferries in comparison, we also went up beginning at 54, which are 54s, are those the sergeants?
Yes.
So we took the sergeants, the next group up, the 54, 55, 56, and moved them above what Korn Ferry was recommending from that standpoint.
That's
and
correct.
That's in line with the second proposed amounts that did. And then on the 57 through 60, we did what law enforcement originally had recommended.
Correct.
At staff level, we still believe that the proposal and the recommended proposal that we had discussed last week would be will be the one we would recommend to the court.
That last column?
Yes, sir.
And then in addition to that, if we go with the raising all levels to $60 from the $50, that would increase that to about 4.15 million in total compensation.
Okay, the two
And you
columns.
got a puzzled look on your face.
When you say 4.1, you're talking about the certification
What I'm
pay
doing
for
is I'm
60?
taking the proposed numbers that GK just gave us, which totals $3,588,000. And then I'm adding, and then I'm
I see, the total
agreeing to
cost.
the 60, or I'm looking at the $60 for all levels as
Gotcha.
opposed to having to go through that. If you add those two numbers together, you get 4,156,000 something.
So the question becomes, Ange, is the current certification pay that we currently utilize, is it embedded in the 3.5?
It is not.
Okay,
It is
so
not. Okay. So which certification pay structure are we using? The tier level or the same?
We have $50 for all tiers right now, for all
$50 for
certification
all tier,
levels.
right?
And I think some of the concern there was trying to keep up with moving from one to the next to the next.
It's part of the concern, yes.
Well, let's try this motion in two parts. I move approval of the proposed recommendations on structure adjustments.
Proposals?
The proposed recommendation, the fourth column to the right, the staff's proposed recommendation.
I'll second it. Discussion?
Is this gonna create additional compression problem among the various positions?
It could cause some compression between the 51s and the 52s. That'll be the the bigger area. It's going to increase a little bit on the top end as well. The 51s are just really where we need staff and where we have the vacancies. The 52s, when we've looked at the structure there, have largely been
Yeah, I mean, the 51s
Well
are your
seated.
that's your jailers. Come on forward, Sheriff. And I think that's where, when we looked in comparison to the other counties that they were comparing to, that we were falling behind. And so we felt like it was important to look at those jailers. Sheriff?
I agree with the jailer's proposal there. The concern is with compression with the 52s and the 53s, quite frankly, because the 53 is your road deputy. And as far as the current survey that we do, I don't know if it encompasses some of our strongest competition is going to be our municipalities at the 60 and 70,000 population level, i.e. in Mansfield or North Richland Hills. And, they're starting to pay around 60,000 these days. So we're
Most of the
about
time, don't they
50
require degrees, and they're looking only for patrol officers?
They're looking for patrol officers is correct. Degrees it varies. Some still just have high school, some 30 hours, some 40 hours, some none.
Okay.
So, and I believe Mansfield right now is none, just offhand. But we made that law enforcement recommendation last week due to the fact that we saw that the certification pay was not going to be very acceptable, and we saw that. And so we made a recommendation. What we'd really like to see is that the 51s, 52s, and 53s certainly get that 4% if at all possible. And we'd love for everything in that recommendation to be done. But at that lower end of 51s, 52s, and 53s, 4% sure would be advantageous to help retention.
What are your higher end, or what are your minimums? And the reason I say it is because Korn Ferry came back, originally their total was coming to 3.2. And we said we wanted to up that a little bit. And the proposed goes, the law enforcement recommendation takes that up by 25%.
Total, yes, sir.
And before we do the certification increase.
Right.
And so that was, the proposed recommendation goes up about 10%, a little more than 10%, I think. So that's why I felt good about that. Now, give me under the proposed deal, what's the max pay for, right now, what's the max pay for your 51?
Today or under the proposal?
Either one.
Under the proposal, the max pay for a 51 will be about $51,400.
And what's the midpoint on the 52s?
Would be about $50,900.
And what's the max on the 52s?
About $59,000.
And that's with the 3% proposal.
Correct.
Okay. And the 53, what's the max on the 53 with the 3% proposal?
It would be about $70,900.
So, I mean,
And 53s are now you're at the peace officer level with the patrol officer. So you give us,
so they're going to get certification too because they're a peace officer, aren't they?
actually, they'll get certification plus the jailer gets certification also.
Okay.
Yeah, $50.
I will just note, I've looked at the structure adjustments that we've done over the past 5 years. If you remember, in 2014, we took the law enforcement structures, and I always say we kind of blew them up and started over because we were concerned about compression. And with our proposals, the staff proposals for this year, the 51s and the 53s will have increased by 14% in the last 5 years. So it equates it didn't, from 2014, make the compression issue any worse between the 51s and the 53s. And we'll acknowledge that the 52s have only gone up by 12.5%. So the 51 to the 53 doesn't seem as big of an issue as, in theory, the 51s to the 52s.
And the 52, who are in your 52 positions?
Mostly dispatchers.
And security specialist.
Yeah, there are some security positions.
And the dispatchers, if I might even call that salary compared to other dispatchers across police departments, we were substantially higher. And of course, the one thing staff also looked at is that from law enforcement recommendation number 2 to what we had proposed, that's another $500,000 that the revenue is not there to cover that right now. So we'll have to open up the budget again to find cuts in order to pay for that. These expenditures then become part of an ongoing escalating cost to the county. That's why we thought that it was very fair, because what we talked about the last time, a proposed recommendation, was better than what Korn Ferry had done, plus what we have done in the last 5 years for the bottom rungs of the Sheriff's Department. We thought that would be a good adjustment that would keep our pay to law enforcement on a progressive level.
I think staff has done a good job of thinking this through. My motion stands.
Yeah, and I really think that we're, like I said, Korn Ferry was already giving an increase in there. We've increased that by an additional 10% on our proposal, on the proposal from staff. And then in addition to that, we're fixing to do about a 20% increase probably if we approve the increase from the 50 to the 60 in the certification pay.
Judge Willie, if I'm understanding, you're proposing the increase also in certificate pay?
That's where I'm leaning right now.
Okay, thank you.
But that's the next motion.
I understand.
Any further discussion on this particular motion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Now, do you have another motion, or are you through?
Oh, sure, why not?
Well, I didn't know if anybody else was going to hop in there or
Feel free. I move approval of the $60 for all level per month certification pay.
I'll second it.
I like the idea of a tier. It encourages our deputies to advance their education.
Absolutely.
I just don't like the additional cost.
Right. Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's it. Yeah.
Property owners in Texas and in Tarrant County have complained enough, very loud and clear, that we need to hold their property taxes down as much as possible. And I think we need to somehow create a tier system because it's really advanced the education level and encourages the deputies to do so.
Absolutely.
But somehow we can figure out a way to keep that cost down. That will make more sense in the long run. So if you lower the INT level a little bit, the lower level, and then lower the middle level, and somehow create a tier but keep the cost low, I think that would be ideal for me.
We can certainly look at that. Unfortunately, public safety, like medical cost and like fire cost across the nation, has just exploded on this very competitive, organizations. Fort Worth is the only people in the world that is overstaffed. Everybody else is, I think Dallas is down by 600 people and so forth like that. It's just a very competitive field.
I understand.
And
Yes.
and certainly, you maintain standards for every 100 people that apply for the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office. We're only going to hire 4 of those, and because of our standards, we don't want to compromise standards with lower pay or anything like that. Understand it's just a highly competitive field, and we're competing with everybody.
Gotcha.
Thank you for listening.
Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.